Welcome to another episode of the Rise and Reinvent podcast, where we spotlight leaders who have navigated change, embraced reinvention, and built extraordinary success. Today's guest is Michael Sanders, founder and CEO of Interactive Government Holdings, Inc. Since launching IGH in 2005, Michael has led the company to secure more than $150 million in contracts, generate annual revenues exceeding $10 million, and employed over 120 people across every U.S. state, territory, and overseas. But behind those numbers is a powerful personal story shaped by early life challenges, the influence of a remarkable grandfather, and a relentless drive to lead with integrity, adaptability, and heart. In this conversation, Michael shares the pivotal moments that reshaped his leadership, the lessons learned from rapid growth and unexpected setbacks, and how he stays grounded while steering a thriving company through uncertainty. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Rise and Reinvent podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Michael Sanders, founder and CEO of Interactive Government Holdings, Inc. He founded the company IGH in 2005 and has since been rewarded with more than $150 million in contracts and has annual revenues exceeding $10 million a year. The company has 120 employees who are doing business in every state and every territory, as well as overseas. Michael has a truly inspiring story to share. Michael, welcome to Rise and Reinvent.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
I always love to start these conversations by learning more about you, not just your career, but your journey from the very beginning. So tell us a little bit more about how you grew up and how that has kind of turned you into the CEO and founder that you are today.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting part about my life was my biological father gave me up for adoption to my stepfather when I was 15. So you don't not many people get adopted when they're 15. Um, so that had a big impact on my life. However, my grandfather, who joined the Marine Corps at 18 in 1956, went to Vietnam, did 4 tours there, got a battlefield commission, and got out of the Marine Corps a captain, was a U.S. Marshal for a little while, and then went back into the Army and retired a colonel. Um, we spent a lot of time together as I grew up, and so he had a major impact on my life, just in terms of he was always um, inputting into me, um, you know, hold the door for ladies, Michael, leaders eat last, the most important call I could get is from a private in the field, I don't, and so, they say leadership, is taught, you're not born with it. And, I was fortunate that, my grandfather, just was always talking to me about being a leader and being a man and what that meant, and the responsibility that it carried. And when I say that, I don't mean in a macho man way. My grandmother was probably 5'1", about 102 pounds wet, and she could get him. He could be ranting and raving, and she would, Mike, she was Hispanic, so she called him Mike, and he would zip, and so he wasn't, I mean, he was obviously very masculine, but but not in an overbearing way. Especially when it came to women, it was more always about respect and just doing the right thing. And he put a lot of things into me that it was kind of funny because when I got out into the world, I sort of thought because I had had all this input that I would be just a natural leader, and people, but people didn't know that about me, and so it was something that, regardless of whether, you've been to all the best courses or done all the best things or had all the best people, it's something I think you still have to earn and learn. And so my grandfather was I would say a major part of my life and my upbringing, and probably one of the bigger reasons that I'm here today. Him and my mom's my biggest fan. I always joke when someone says they saw a podcast of mine, I go, "Oh, you and my mom must have watched it." That makes two of you. So, but yeah, she's always been my biggest fan, and he's always been, sort of just this overarching influence, positive influence, and just always telling me that I could do whatever I put my mind to, and that if I worked hard and wanted it, that I could get it. So um, that's probably kind of a long intro, but yeah, I would say that those two things had big impacts on my life, in such a way that um, when my parents did get divorced and my dad did give me up for adoption, it didn't end up derailing me. I think like it probably could have, because I had sort of this foundation, this structure of all this positive input that I had, the rest of my life. So although it was hurtful, it's hurtful to this day, and I'm almost 50, so it's still hurt, it's still hurtful, but it didn't derail me. I think which I think it could have, had I not had all those other things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, I want to follow up with that by asking you, what's a personal achievement that you're most proud of?
I'm proud of my kids, my family, my wife. Um, it takes, um, I'm not, I'm not easy, in order, to do the things I do. It's not easy to, um, sort of be in my hemisphere, it can be a hurricane sometimes in terms of, the things that I'm doing and how I do them, and the travel and the business, and so um and of course there's never, you're never going to have a true balance when you're achieving greatly, when you're trying to achieve greatly. You have to be obsessed, you have to be obsessive, you have to be ready to do whatever it takes, whenever it's required. And I think that's one of the things that I got most out of the Marine Corps was being able to do things I didn't want to do when I didn't want to do them. And I think as a business owner, that's a really important characteristics, because it's easy to do a lot of things in business. It's easy to make an Instagram post or a snap. There's a lot of easy parts of it, but the nitty gritty, the hard, the things that um, come at you, on a random Tuesday. Those are the things that you have to be willing and ready to jump into, really whenever it's required. And so, yeah, personal achievement, I would say is having a great family.
That's great. And explaining how you're a big part of their success and they're a big part of your success as well, is really important. Can you tell us about a pivotal moment in your career that sparked reinvention? And so the podcast, just to give a little context, podcast is of course about reinvention, and it's successful everyday heroes like you, and we know there's a journey behind that success. So we want to hear about a pivotal moment where you had to reinvent yourself.
It's funny because when I was at Harvard Business School, I did a program there after we had won a large contract, $50 million contract. And I went from having five to 150 employees. Overnight, it took 10 years, but overnight, to most people. And at the very end of the 3-year course, they talk about Larry Ellison and how, most publicly traded CEOs, they have a tenure of 3.5 years. And he was the CEO of Oracle, I think, for 20 some years. And they asked him, how did he do that? And he said, well, I had to reinvent myself every 5 years, to be, what to stay relevant, essentially. And they asked him, well, how many direct reports stayed with you all that time? And he said, out of 100 direct reports over those 20 years, he had five people that were with him that entire time. And they are telling you this story as you're graduating because the end of the 3 years, and it's not three like college years. It's you go for 3 weeks, you're with 150 other business owners,
Mhm.
then you talk about all kinds of things, strategies, and then you go do them or execute or whatever, and then you come back the next year and everybody tells, how it went,
Okay.
essentially. Um, but it's a great program, and it was great for me because, the network you get is worldwide. But staying relevant, and reinventing myself. I had to do it when I won that contract because I wasn't prior to winning that $50 million contract. The year before, we did about $400,000 in revenue. And then when we won that contract, we were doing 1.2 million a month. So, I not only had to sort of reinvent myself, but I also had to there was a certain like when you have sort of that big of a flip and your lifestyle, um it can go to your head,
Yeah.
and you know so I'm very lucky that I have some great mentors and some great friends and some people that were not afraid to check me and say, hey, you're acting like kind of an asshole. I had some friends, that said, you're not, you're not taking advice anymore. You think you won this big contract and now you know it all. And in my mind, I thought I would win a $50 million one, then $100 million one, then a 200, and the
Hmm.
business just doesn't go that way. We didn't even end up winning the recompete. So we ended up going, from a $15 million company to a $3 million company, and had to build that, that sort of ebb and flow. And um, so yeah, so that was that contract really, um, I don't want to say it changed my life because it wasn't necessarily the contract, but it had me. One, it gave me the funds to attend this, the course at Harvard. It made it so, after 10 years of really just putting my bills together every month, wondering where some months, were coming from. Some of the contracts I had, had people that were making $10 an hour on it. I had people in warehouses at NIST and people that, it was always, that anxiety there that I'm not going to be able to make payroll or not going to be able to do something next month, and And once that contract hit, I haven't really had to worry about it since. Not, and that's all, that comes from also doing the work and, staying on the grind and ensuring that, just because we had this one huge one that we were still keeping the sword sharp, as I like to say, and making sure that we were still going after as many things as we could. Um, yeah, it was a very interesting time, and I learned a lot from having that huge fluctuation, in terms of revenue, and then also then losing it 3 years later, trying to
Hmm.
recompete when we got undercut. Um, so yeah, so that was definitely a time where I think I went through multiple iterations of who I was gonna be, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like a mindset shift. Yes, I'm a CEO of a company and I have employees, but that shift of that large contract, you had even more employees, you had even more that you probably had to delegate to others. So just changing your mindset around this new larger contract,
Yeah,
which,
Ben Franklin says now that I have a horse and a cart, everyone bids me good morrow. And so when you win a $50 million contract, you suddenly have a lot of great friends. And so that was another learning aspect for me too, is, who are my real friends and why are they here, and, what are people's motives? Not that I'm suspicious or think ill of people, but a lot of people took advantage of me, in a short amount of time, in little ways. No one stole millions of dollars from me, but people took advantage in ways because so many things were going on that I couldn't possibly have purview into everything. And so that's why I did, I went to that course because I felt like I needed to learn to be a professional CEO. I felt like I needed to, um, upskill myself so that way I wouldn't let a lot of people down.
mhm, okay. Um, Next question is, when life is unpredictable, how do you stay centered and clear-headed?
So for me, I don't ever. I think life is always unpredictable, and I don't look at the unpredictability as a surprise. I think one of the things going on this year, as we all know, with Doge and everything that happened this year, a lot of people were either fearful, frozen, or frantic. And so my goal was to be focused on the things that I knew I could control, which was, my mergers and acquisitions. I know we all know that the government's not gonna, is not spending money. Cuts are getting taken everywhere. Lots of people that I talked to lost. Some people lost entire portfolios full of work, and they're not in business. And some people lost 5%, 50%. There was people all along the board. And it was interesting because it's the first time that both the government and contractors have taken those hits at the same time. Normally, the government says, "Oh, we're going to try to save some money," and over the course of the next couple of years, the agency sheds a little bit, and some people get hurt, some people don't, but it just seemed like there was just devastation on both sides of the fence this year.
Mhm,
And so for me, when I looked at the chaos, I go, well, there's opportunity in chaos, and so how do I find that opportunity, and how do I lead my company through it? And so we didn't have an immediate effect or immediate cuts, but we knew we were going to take some. And so, being that there wasn't as many contracts coming out as there normally was, we tried to be innovative and look at it from a customer perspective, which is they're going through the same thing that we are, and they're having to do the same amount of work with some agencies half the people and half the money.
Hmm.
SBA got cut by 50%. GSA took, huge cuts. DOD, I mean, everybody. So for us, we were putting in unsolicited proposals for contract closeouts because if they're canceling 25,000 contracts, they're going to need someone to close them out, right?
Hmm.
And so we tried to think about it from a customer perspective of what could we do that would be helpful to them where they're at right now. And so um, that's that's a perspective we took, and um, it seemed to, although we haven't heard anything back on our unsolicited proposals, it did keep our team sharp. It kept them doing something, and kept us busy and keeping our mind focused on the business as opposed to being focused on all the things that were going wrong.
Yeah, I love that. You know, um, one of the things that happens when people have fear is either fight or flight, right? And that flight is what you talked about is frozen or frantic. And so you took that as an opportunity to focus, and it sounds like it's paying off for you. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's I I'm a eternal optimist. I'm not an unreal. I'm a cautious eternal optimist. I don't, think, money's gonna fall from heaven, but I know that if I continue to do the things that I know I'm supposed to do, and I try to do them as well as I possibly can, and my team does the same thing, I know that on the other side of it is growth. Is the things that that we want. So, did we have to make some adjustments? Absolutely. Did we have to, um, did we have to refocus and reorient and look at pivoting and seeing where new work might be. We did all that, of course. And we tried to take a broader perspective of the market as a whole, just to mostly stay informed. I was checking through our market intelligence platforms, how many contracts were getting cut. I checked like once a week, and it was like 5,000, 9,000, 10,000, 20. I think it was 25,000 the last time I checked, contracts have been canceled. And so, when you're looking at the chaos, that's kind of where, the idea for the opportunity in there came in. And so, staying focused on this acquisition that I've been working on, I think was, we'll have the turnout that I expect for the
Okay,
year.
very good. What you mentioned, some of the tactics and strategies that you follow during uncertainty. What are daily or weekly habits that help you stay adaptable in a constantly changing work environment?
Uh, I exercise every day. I try to read, um, or listen to audiobooks. I read the Wall Street Journal pretty much every morning. Um, um, yeah, I mean, everybody has, well, I think to be a high achiever, you have to have a process. And so,
Mhm.
for me, that process is waking up, exercising, Generally, while I'm exercising, if I'm on the treadmill or the bike, I can read while I could do that. I got good at Harvard reading while I was on a treadmill. So, and also, you know, I mentioned that, I said kind of tongue in cheek, there's really no work-life balance, but also taking some time over the summer when I may not have normally because things were slower, to spend that time with my family. I knew that when we finish this acquisition, it's going to be very busy. The the company has customers in 42 bases around the world. So I knew I'm going to be very busy and not probably home a lot. So I try to take advantage of the summer and the slowness and just spend some extra time with my kids and my wife and, just try to take a big deep breath um, and, and, and I think there's something to be had about stillness, also. You can you can be in motion and not making progress. Motion is not progress, and I've seen a lot of business owners, they like to be in motion, but they're not really making progress. So, and sometimes I think being still or taking a moment to take a big deep breath or um, just be with the people that surround you and that love you and support you, and spend time with them, I think is rejuvenating. And, I think it's kind of critical to success because you have to be investing in the people that are investing in you and the people that rely on you as well.
Absolutely. What has been the most unexpected lesson in your career journey?
It's going to seem completely obvious, but to me, it's kind of shocking. It was a little shocking, is that people will tell you that something's a bad idea because they're scared or they couldn't do it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I always take, I always tell my kids, you know, qualify take qualified advice, qualify the person that you're taking advice from, and know their motives. Try to at least, or if you don't know their motives, let that let that help you to determine how much weight you give their advice. Because I found that a lot of people um, will tell you, that something's not a good idea because they couldn't do it.
That really resonates with me. Family members who want to offer advice and tell you not to do something, and I never really considered it as fear or maybe they feel uncomfortable doing it. So thank you for sharing that. That really helped me.
And just to iterate on that a little bit, people will tell you something, is a bad idea, like I said, not only because they're scared, but because I think they can't, they know they couldn't do it.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
when they see you doing it, and you out there pursuing and it's as easy as, and I'm not even talking about succeeding in business. I'm just talking about actually having the guts to go out there and pursue what you want to do. that
Hmm.
that really scares some people. And I've had really interesting conversations with people that are really emotionally intelligent and they're very self-aware, and so they know they're risk averse, and so they have a different, how do you deal with that, and it's so funny when you talk to somebody um that is trying to tell you something's a bad idea, but they've never done it. and I don't mean in terms of being successful. I just mean in terms of pursuing something that was out of the norm, or that wasn't, you know, in the plan, or, wasn't part of the initial plan, but, you had an idea, you wanted to go after it, and you went and did it. You figured out, how to do this stuff. And people ask me a lot of times, because I mentor a lot of veteran owned companies, and I'll bring them into my office. I'll share with them how we do everything. Let them talk to my CFO or HR, BD. I'll show them how we, break down proposals, how we respond. And people always ask me, like, why do you do that? And the answer is easy. It's because I could show 100 people, but only one or two of them is going to actually go out and do that work.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they want to, tweet about it, post about it, talk about it. But in business, you just have to be about it, and you have to do it. And if you're not doing it, then you don't, mm, you're not, you're not gonna, get where you want to go. So, um,
You're missing opportunities. You miss what does it say? You miss 100% of the
the shots you don't
opportunities.
take. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and the thing is that, for a lot of people, it's, you'll hear every excuse, there is in the book. I have family, I have kids, I have this, I have that, I can't quit my job, I can't do that, and all those things are true for pretty much everybody. I was fortunate enough, to start my company when I was, I only had one kid. Now I have five, so it's different, but, you know, um, but it's still interesting to me when I hear people talk about the things that they think I can't do. And I always just take it with a grain of salt, and with a smile, and just kind of in the back of my mind, I'm just kind of going like, watch me.
Very good. Yes, very bold. What has been your biggest compromise in life and career?
Hmm. I mean, I think every day is a compromise. When you're an owner and you can make your own schedule, and as a dad, there's a guilt that I have, when I have to take a trip, when I have to work late, when I have to do certain things. And so, I don't think I can't think of one necessarily big compromise, but what I do feel is like every day there's a million little compromises, that you could make, and um, that could be detrimental, or that could be, something that you have to, focus through, right? And so for me, compromise is like, you know, trying to get home as early as I can, after I've gotten everything done that I've needed to get done, or like, like the email I wrote you at midnight last night. I didn't know that orientation was, my wife had COVID, and so, she had missed some emails, and oh no, there's a orientation tomorrow. The oldest daughter is going to high school, and so, um, it's little things like that, and again, appreciate your flexibility, but that was a little compromise, because initially, when she said there's an orientation tomorrow, I was like, well, what time is it? I have a podcast I'm recording, and she said, no, it's 9:30 to 11:30, and I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm recording. Um, And then I thought about it for a little bit and I said, well, I said, it's late, but I was like, I'll send an email, and if I can get it rescheduled, then I'll go to the orientation. And so that was a big compromise for me.
Yeah.
And if you had said, no, I'm set up to record at 9:30, then I would have been on at 9:30 and I would have missed the orientation. And so those are the dad guilt kind of compromises that I go through. It's usually not something major or life changing. It's always just these day to day things.
Yes, absolutely. And they add up sometimes, so you have to find the proper balance. I call it the parent guilt, right?
Yeah, it is.
But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, they remember down the road, but they also remember the great experiences, the wonderful vacations that you paid for.
Yeah.
And so you can't lose sight of that.
No, and yeah, they know that they have a extraordinary life.
Yes.
And they get to do extraordinary things that not a lot of other people get to do.
Yeah.
And so that does make me feel better in some way. But I also try to balance that out. I did a lot of traveling for a nonprofit group that I'm on, and they combat sex trafficking for children. And so I've been in some really terrible places and seen some really terrible things. And so, um, not that I want to take my children to see terrible things, but um, I want them to know that life isn't all, first class in the Ritz-Carlton, and
Mhm.
that there's people out there that are digging ditches, and there's a girl on the side of a mountain in Nepal that's making asphalt on a Tuesday morning, not in school, and there's kids that aren't in school and people that are suffering. So I try to balance out um, the extra with the knowledge and with the experiences, showing them that not they're very blessed. We are very blessed to get to live the life that we live.
Absolutely. So my final question, it kind of aligns with what you just said, which is, as you think about life and career, so your entire journey, what legacy do you hope to leave?
I wear this like dog tag. It's like a little dog tag. It's got a IGH logo on it, but on the back of it, it says um, hard head, soft heart. And I think, when people think about me, I'd like them, I, my executive team will tell you that if an employee asks for something and I can do it, like the answer is always yes. And so, and, and so I think in terms of legacy, I think compassion and empathy, and success kind of speaks for itself. I don't really, I don't think anyone's going to care how many dollars in contracts I won at my funeral. But I do hope that my children remember, um, you know all the times that we got to spend together, and the things that we got to do, and the places that we got to go, and the experiences that we had.
That's wonderful. I have really enjoyed our conversation today. I thank you for sharing your upbringing and your grandfather and how he impacted you, because that's really important. I appreciate you sharing a little bit more about the parent guilt, because it does exist for moms and dads. But, I think we realize that the kids have a good balance of, hey, I'm not around as much, but you have all these great things and you have a wonderful life. And so that's extremely important. And then sharing your reinvention, from 5 to 1,500 employees. And
150,
oh,
150.
150.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Still,
five to
still.
150. Yeah. No, it's yeah, it's when you are over 100 employees, it's like having a little village. Every day you got something, a broken leg or shoulder replacement, pregnancy. I mean, it could be anything. And I'm not
Any,
saying any of those things in a negative way. I'm just saying that those types of problems start to creep up once you're over 100 employees. It feels like.
absolutely. And then you know, it makes you have to balance the business side of it with the personal as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I look forward to watching your continued success, and I wish you the best.
Thank you. You too, Nicole. Appreciate it.